Okay, so I wanted to say a few things about the day, that it's the 7th of Mar Cheshvan. So this is a special day, when the day when we, in the bracha, where we add Talu Matar, davening for rain. We wait 2 weeks after Yontiv till the last Jew got home from the celebrations in Yerushalayim until they reached their little house by the Euphrates. And it's supposed to be, this is really like the end of the sequence of Tishrei that we celebrated together. And when they say this, the Rebbe would always say about unpacking the treasures that we accumulated, in Tishrei. And for all of us, I guess it's, it's different treasures. I'll share one little treasure since it's connected with the day. So, so because of the unusual conditions this year, we had the night of Simchas Torah. We went to our neighbor's house, the Wolfsons, for anyone who might know them. And their daughter and son-in-law lived downstairs, and 3 lovely young guys who lived with us and some neighbors from across the street. And there was 4 small children under the age of 4 in lieu of Sifrei Torah. And it was really quite beautiful. The joy that was able to be brought down with just a few neighbors getting together and dancing, children were very happy to be picked up and hugged and kissed and danced with. To see that you can just make joy with a couple, great joy with a couple of neighbors, an important lesson for the year. So l'chaim, the lessons and treasures we gathered over Tishrei, we should start to bring them down and celebrate them, l'chaim. The other thing about this day, Zayin Cheshvan, is that it's the yurtzeit of Reb Meir Shapiro, who's known for 2 things. He started the Daf Yomi, and he also founded the yeshiva in Lublin. This was the 1920s. This was actually the first yeshiva where the Bachram could sleep there and eat there. They didn't have to worry about where they were going to get their next meal, where they were going to sleep. It was all taken care of. And he himself really labored. He went to America in the 1920s to collect money to build this yeshiva. And when they had the opening, many people came to speak, including his Rebbe. His Rebbe was the Chortkova Rebbe, Reb Friedman. And many people spoke, and the Chortkova Rebbe was the last one to speak. I see it says people are waiting in the waiting room. Can I have is Elazar there? Elazar, could you let them into the waiting? Admit. Oh, it disappeared. They must have been admitted. Okay. So the Chortkova was the last one to speak, and he said that Reb Meir, many people have said wonderful things about you today, but what I'm most interested to know is what was the secret good deed that you did that only you and Hashem know about that gave you the schus to have the merit to open this yeshiva? And I think it's such an interesting question for all of us, like it's the good, we could see it's the brachas in our life. We have the schus to do things, bring Hashem's light into the world. But what's the secret thing we did that gave us the schus? All right, so I thought that's a good story for Reb Meir Shapiro. Okay, now back to our book. Here's my book without the cover on. The cover's getting worn. Okay, so I want to just say one thing connected to what we spoke about last week about the circumstances of our life being hashgacha pratis. Remember that idea, the circumstances of our life? So one more thought about that. The circumstances of our life are from Hashem to help us lower our ego. And I thought that's a very interesting sentence because I wouldn't have understood that sentence at all before I started to learn Torah Sanefesh. First, I thought, do I want to lower my ego? But we learned that lowering the ego is what lets in the room for joy and Hashem's rachamim. There's a lot of advantages to lowering the ego. While the raised ego is so exhausting to hold it up, there's just no room for joy and rachamim. So Again, the circumstances of our life are from Hashem to help us lower our ego. It's a mind-blowing idea. And something that I've learned from Rabbi Effie is if my prayers aren't immediately answered, we can pray to change the circumstances. If my prayers aren't immediately answered, therefore I still need these circumstances to lower my ego. And Hashem is giving me these circumstances to help me. Again, it's a mind-blowing idea. Who would have thought it, that Hashem is giving us all these circumstances of our life to help us? Okay, so let's continue. I just had to share that thought. Okay, so here we are. Everyone was here last week. Remembers, we started chapter 7, entitled Positive Reinterpretation and Inner Transformation. And we're on page 70, the second page in this. Making progress. It'd probably only be about 500 more classes before we, okay, but let's take it. Let's be here now. It was, okay, the little teeny tiny now. That's part of the eternal now. Okay, so I'm going to start reading the next to the last paragraph on 70. Furthermore, the imminent dawn of redemption is awakening us to our higher and surer selves. We feel the power of the Mashiach era already coursing to feel that at. You know, this is the era of Mashiach. There's a footnote on page 165 for those book holders. It is implied, what I said, I think too many people in the house might be on Zoom. Hold on once. I'm back. Okay, so I think we're still here. Can somebody wave if they can hear and see me? Yes. Okay, good. Life is good. Okay, so we're going to look at footnote 1 on page 165. It is implied in the Zohar, and so we witness in our generation, that an individual who studies the inner dimension of the Torah, Kabbalah, and Hasidus is more likely to be awake to this phenomenon within his or her psyche. So we learn, that's what we're doing now. We're learning Hasidus and Kabbalah, and we're more likely now to feel Mashiach, the era of Mashiach in our blood. Okay, okay, this call to power emboldens us to attempt to face evil in a way that previous generations were rightly reticent to attempt. Now, footnote 2 on page 166 is speaking about, an example of this is the Lubavitcher Rebbe's call to teach the Gentile world to follow the 7 laws of Noach that the Torah obligates them to live by. And I won't read through the whole footnote, but it's saying that in previous generations, it was too dangerous to do that. It was too dangerous to teach Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach because of the anti-Semitism that existed. Just to stay alive was considered a great thing. And I continue, I'll just read a little more. To face head-on anti-Semitism and combat it demands the greatest call to power, because we still need it today. The Rebbe instructed us to do this by teaching all Gentiles the 7 Noach laws. The Rebbe didn't approve of publicly debating religious issues. He little light dispels much darkness, and much light transforms the darkness itself into light. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. If we have contact with a non-Jew, it's not, God forbid, to cheat him in business. It's to teach him the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. And from our contacts, we could have an old friend from college, an old friend from somewhere. And there's so many different books on Sheva Mitzvahs. Rav Yitzchak has written a book on Sheva Mitzvahs, and Hannah's spoken about it many times. So it's one of the ways of turning evil into goodness and darkness into light. Okay, the bottom line's on 70. And since we are capable of this, for the advent of the ultimate redemption is dependent upon the release of all the sparks of I'm going to define the 3 levels of evil because we should know them by heart. And they're always good to review. The first level is what the Torah tells us not to do and our desire to do it, which is a bit whimsical. I don't know why I should think I'm laughing and crying at the same time, but I think it's good to be able to feel it when it's happening and to define it and to label it like this is I am now having an attack of the desire to either do or speak or think something the Torah says I shouldn't do. And if I can define it, it makes it much more easy for me to deal with it. I found this very liberating, this idea that, so this idea, the first level of evil, what the Torah says we shouldn't do, our desire to do it, to note when we have a desire to do it. We all have it. It's part of the human condition. We're created as people. So it's good to label it. It's liberating to label it. So that's all. That's one of the meditations for this week. Note when it happens and label it. Otherwise, it becomes something that I think is part of me, rather than just something I can separate from and label. And the second one, everyone remembers, the second level of evil are my psychological complexes that keep me from fulfilling my shlichus, my mission. And that's, we have to be able to label that also. There's things we want to do. Why should we be stopped from doing it? There's things we want to call that cousin, and I can find, maybe there was some like 3 generations ago, some family mishaps. And I'm letting that keep me from calling what's psychological. We have to label our psychological complexes that keep us from fulfilling our shlichus. And then the most subtle form, the third level of evil, is anything that embitters my life, totally personal, whatever embitters my life. I have to sweeten it. That's how I get rid of that evil, sweetening what embitters my life. And that's why I'm learning this lovely book now. This we're learning about. Yes, to the top of 71, revealing the evil within us in order to transform it into good becomes not only our own best interest, but also our sacred duty. In other words, we're doing it for everybody. If I label, I'm having a desire to think, speak, or do something the Torah says not to speak, think, or do, and I'm not doing it. I'm doing it for the cosmos. The cosmos is affected positively, and we're all in it together. By our doing it, we can be helping. That's the non-local effect of quantum physics. My deciding to do that can help another Jew on the other side of the planet also make such a decision in a more difficult situation. Like we strengthen it for everybody. Very exciting part, treating phobias on page 71. Here is our chance to cure ourselves of all our phobias. If anyone wants to put their camera on, come on, be brave. Look how I have my camera on and I'm even speaking. So there's, come on, be brave. Oh, that's good. I like that attitude. Yes, it's that, oh, I'm having a better time. I'm having a much better time already. Thank you. Oh, this is life. Oh, I could just go on forever now. Thank you. Really, it makes such a difference, that human effect. Okay, the courage and fearlessness that accompanies the Mashiach call to power enables us, first of all, to cope with the various fears or phobias that plague us. Now, here's a great sentence, the next sentence. In truth, any fear other than the fear of Hashem is a phobia, i.e. a neurotic state of exaggerated or misdirected fear. That's like a mind-blowing sentence. We have to really take that in. Any fear other than the fear of Hashem is a phobia, which means a neurotic state of exaggerated or misdirected fear. Any fear other than the fear of Hashem gives rise to secondary fears, the fear of fear, the fear of fear of fear, and so on. Each successive state of fear strikes its roots deeper into the psyche's unconscious, ultimately giving rise to negative psychological consequences. Only the fear of Hashem is positive in essence, and of it is said, happy is the man who fears continuously. So this is what we're learning, how to transform all of our other fears. This is what we're going to be learning now, how to transform all of our other fears into fear of Hashem, something we've always wanted to do. What a deal. Okay. When we are young, fear is useful, for it protects us from harm. The parent wisely teaches the child to be afraid of fire or of playing in the street, and uses the child's fear of punishment to discipline him. So let's look at that again. The child's fear of punishment to discipline him. The lowest level of fear is fear of punishment. I mean, the next level is like fear of sin, because I don't want to be separated from Hashem. But fear of punishment is I don't want to be punished. I understand there's cause and effect in the world. I don't want to be. It's not so like romantic. It's not like, it's like an immature level of fear, but sometimes it can save the day. You know, I'm in a tempting situation, tempting. And instead of some fear punishment, okay, I won't do it. So this is a childish level of fear, the fear of punishment. But as we mature, we learn how to discipline ourselves and not to be afraid of things, but simply to be careful. We thus can reserve, not to be afraid of things, but to be careful. Isn't that good? Instead of being neurotically afraid, to be careful. We can thus reserve our true fear solely for Hashem, for inasmuch as Hashem is the ultimate possessor of power, he is the only one we should truly fear. So we're developing this idea. We're developing this idea in our conscious mind. Hashem is the ultimate possessor of power. He's the only one we should truly fear. Got that down? Then we can continue. In other words, to the extent we remain afraid of anything other than Hashem, we remain children. So that's an important idea. If we're afraid of anything Hashem, we remain children stuck at an immature level of emotional development. So we have to look at it. We have to look at ourselves. Do we have other fears? It's simply an immature level of emotional development. Well, it's good to label it. The reverse is also true. Turning the page, a child who outgrows his childhood fears can be an adult even while still a child. And then even though I often skip these little stories in italics here, this one is about the Baal Shem Tov. So let's look at that together. In his last words to his young son, the Baal Shem Tov's father, Rabbi Eliezer, told him, Srolek, fear nothing and no one other than Hashem himself. From that day on, the Baal Shem Tov feared nothing but Hashem. He walked fearlessly in the depths of the forest at all hours of day and night, fearing no creature. This was actually, in the last words to his young son, the story about the Baal Shem Tov is actually taken from the Frierdiker Rebbe's writings, Likutei Deborim, written by the previous Lubavitch Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, when he was giving the history of Hasidus. So this is a famous story, and it's good to quote the Frierdiker Rebbe. Okay, more exciting information for us. Continue. The classic example of a phobia is paranoia. Paranoid people envision other human beings, animals, and sometimes even objects as threats. That was a frightening. I got frightened, but I should have just fear of Hashem, right? Hashem has brought us back together. Okay, so again, the less we fear Hashem, the more we fear others. Let's face it. Okay, let's look at footnote 7. Here, this is a very short, but this is a very important footnote on page 167, very short and important. This is because the fear of Hashem derives directly from the belief that there is none beside him, ein od milvado. This is saying something very deep. If we believed ein od milvado, then we would only be afraid of Hashem. This is a good test for our Ein Od Milvado. How deeply is that a part of us? Ein Od Milvado. If we believe that, nothing else but Hashem, there's no one else to be afraid of. Okay, so these are very important ideas. Okay, let's see. That was footnote 7. So back to the text about the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov taught that the midrashic statement that Hashem world anew should be the basis of our understanding of reality. Okay, another meditation for this week. What is the basis of our understanding of reality, you might ask? It's what the Baal Shem Tov taught, that Hashem is continuously creating the world anew. You know, that we say this twice in the first bracha before the Shema. We speak about how Tamid Hashem is recreating the world. We say at the beginning of that bracha and towards the end of that bracha. I'm so taken with this idea that sometimes when I'm doing speed davening, I hope you're loud, I just say that line because I want to remember that Hashem is recreating the world each moment. It seems like an important thing to remember. This is the basis of our reality. That sounds exciting. Not just some old stale world, but a fresh world each moment. Everything that exists, the Midrash teaches, is just a reflection of a higher spiritual antecedent. Applied to the concept of fear, this means that anything that induces fear in us is spiritually rooted in Hashem's attribute of fear. Thus, all worldly fears stem and merely imperfect versions of the fear of Hashem. All fear we have comes from Hashem. Anything else, it's an imperfect version of our fear of Hashem. So that's saying something very deep, that we can trace any other fear we have. No matter how deep the fear is, we can trace it back to fear of Hashem. This being the case, we should ponder, both before and when we feel afraid, why should we be afraid of an external fallen object of fear? Shouldn't we recognize the inner kernel of its essence and realize, important information, Hashem sent us this fear in order to remind us, to reinforce our fear of Him. Now that's really turning darkness into light. Find yourself afraid of something, remember Hashem sent us this fear in order to reinforce our fear of Hashem, our awe in Hashem's presence. Okay, the top of 73. To cure ourselves of exaggerated and misdirected fear, we must first reject it and forcibly break it. If a person suffers from paranoia, for example, he must endanger his life and step outside, saying to Hashem, we can do this inside or outside, listen to this important quote, "Do with me as you like, I am in your hands." Do with me as you like, I am in your hands. I'm going to say it one more time, and then I think we should spend 10 seconds meditating on it. This is the cure for all other fears, saying to Hashem, do with me as you like, I am in your hands. Okay, can everyone mind spending 10 seconds saying that to Hashem or meditating on it? Do with me as you like, I am in your hands. If we firmly believe in Hashem, we will fear nothing, not even death. So this idea, putting ourselves in Hashem's hands, and then we will come to fear nothing, not even death, to not even fear death, because we feel we think of that. Some people might have heard the story before, but I think it's worth retelling, that 46 and a half years ago, when I was a new Baal Tshuva, just fresh moved to Crown Heights from 1 week, and I had gone back upstate and brought my dog, so sad to admit my sins, back to Crown Heights, and we were walking down President Street. The dog wasn't on a leash because I wasn't I wasn't ready to put my dog or animal soul on a leash yet, since I was only from 1 week. It takes a little time to, get into the mood. That it's not just Shabbos, and you have to actually rein in the animal. I'm laughing and crying. Rein in that poor animal soul that was not used to being on a leash. Okay, so I was walking down the street with the dog, and coming towards me was Nechami Greisman, Oliver Sholem, for people who remember her. It's been many years since she passed away, but she was a young woman of 21 then, before she was married. And we had met at the week before was the Seder at Machon Chana, where the Rebbe came to the Seder, and Nechami was there, and she remembered me. And she was coming down the street, and she saw me and the dog, and she stopped for a moment. And I saw she was afraid of the dog, which wasn't so uncommon to people in Crown Heights. And she stopped, and I saw her overcome her fear of dogs. Like she turned her fear of dogs into fear of Hashem. And she came right up to me, and we had a warm conversation. And I was very impressed, because it's not a simple thing. It's really hamoach shalit al halev. The mind rules the heart. It was a very good example for me, very inspiring. But this is what it's talking about here, that we're being empowered. We're being empowered by the Baal Shem Tov and Rav Yitzchak and each other at our Farbringen, that we can overcome other fears and this is what we're learning now, how to turn all other fears, even fear of death, into awe in Hashem's presence. Okay. Then there's another story that I think many people are familiar with, but since it's about the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, I'm going to read it. You feel free to read right along with me. During the Stalinist era, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak of Lubavitch, the Frierdiker Rebbe, was interrogated by a communist official who sought to intimidate him by brandishing a gun. So this communist said, "This toy makes people cooperate. Fear of it has opened many a mouth." Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak replied, "That toy frightens only someone who has but a single world, this world, and many gods, but not one who has one God and two worlds, this world and the world to come." Stunned by the Rebbe's response, the communist official put down his gun. So the fear of Hashem, that was the only fear that he had. So this is what we're learning about, how to turn our phobias into fear of Hashem. What a deal. That's certainly transforming darkness into light. By rejecting the fear as it first appears, one reveals its inner divine life force, the divine attribute of fear that brings it into being. So again, when we feel fear, to use it to connect with fear of Hashem and ultimately awe of Hashem. The higher, we spoke about the lowest level of fear is fear of punishment. Okay, not really such, but it works. It works. I'm laughing and crying simultaneously, but it works. Fear of punishment. Then there's fear of sin, which is fear of being separated from Hashem. I don't want to be separated from Hashem. And then we have awe of being in Hashem's presence, and we're being empowered to bring all our fears back to that. That's their source. They just came down in a misdirected way, right? We want to live, and that awe of being in Hashem's presence makes every moment meaningful. And we're never alone. We never have to feel lonely because we're in Hashem's presence. So we can use fear to spur us on to make this transformation. So we're going to be very excited the next time we're afraid. It's odd being, sometimes we have a mouse on top of the cabinet that waves at me. I'm able to deal with that, but if I open the cabinet and see the mouse, I do feel, a lion probably. I'd say, what a cute lion, let me pet you. But something about a mouse being among my tea boxes, I'm now going to use that to elevate that fear and go all the way back to awe in Hashem's presence. Okay, so here we go. God is more than fear. In truth, it is a state of awe, an awareness of always standing in his presence. What is awe? Like you might say, what is awe of Hashem? Here's the answer: an awareness of always standing in his presence. Every time we speak about this, we speak about awe of being in Hashem's presence. I feel better. I feel better right away. There's something about it that makes me feel better right away. I see we have 39 participants here. I'm supposed to learn how to take a picture. Wow, that is so cool. Look at that. All these nice people are joining us to empower each other. To empower each other, that we should be able to live these ideas and meditate on these ideas. There's so many important ideas here. Okay, so again, awe is an awareness of always standing in his presence. In order to truly stand in awe of Hashem, we must not only overcome all other fears, but actually transform them into the awe of Hashem. To transform, and again, that's the title of our book, Transforming Darkness into Light. So here's a subcategory: transforming all of our fears into awe of Hashem. So now life is going to be very exciting this week. We're going to be able to say, anytime we feel afraid. And remember, being careful it can be also, at one level, is transforming fears into being careful. We don't have to be afraid of crossing the street. We can be careful, but our fears have to go back to an awe of being in Hashem's presence. So it's saying that to transform them, and the word transform here, for those who have a book, is an alex, like it's an actual transformation, of darkness into light, into the awe of Hashem. Okay, transforming all other fears into the awe of Hashem is a process of sweetening. When we do this, we experience a deep sense of liberation, release, and joy. So it's a sweetening, and that's what we want. Because, see, the book constantly goes back to this theme of Hachna'ah Havdalah Hamtakah that we learned in the first 6 chapters of the book, of this subjugation or submission. That's the Hachna'ah, lowering the ego. And then the separating, that we could look at whatever it is objectively, and ultimately the sweetening. So obviously it's a sweetening that we take. Someone could take a fear of dogs, which is such an unpleasant feeling, and sweeten it into a fear of being in Hashem's presence. We are being empowered to do this, people. Okay, then I have footnote 14. I have a little circle around it, so I'm going to go straight to footnote 14. This is a nice one. Footnote 13 I skipped. That's not right at all. Okay, so we're going to do footnote 13. I'm just going to do 14 because it's right here. This is the mystical meaning of the phrase in Bereshis, the Pachad Yitzchak, the fear of Yitzchak, which may be read, fear will laugh, because Yitzchak means will laugh. Fear will laugh is the sweetening of transforming of all other fears into the awe of Hashem, a process of sweetening, and it leaves us with a sense of liberation, release, and joy. So I'm just going to read footnote 13 here also on 167 for anyone with a book who wants to follow. With the coming of Mashiach, the Navi tells us that a suckling will play on the hole of a serpent, and a weaned child will place his hand on the lair of a rattlesnake. This is a quote from Yeshaya chapter 11. The snake, the Nachash, the arch symbol of human fear, will become a source of play and delight. This is the third and final stage of sweetening, where the evil itself is transformed into good. The snake becomes my friend, my pet. Now, even before the coming of Mashiach, one can foretaste the delight of playing with the snake by studying the inner dimension of the Torah which reveals both the essential divinity within all and the truth that even now, evil is the throne of good. And evil is the throne of good is the idea that it spurs us on. It spurs us on, these levels of evil. Like the traumatic experiences, what embitters our life. For many people of us that became Bali Tshuva, and Tshuva is, the Rebbe would say with a little smile that even a tzaddik Gomer can do Tshuva. Hashem is infinite. We can get infinitely closer to Hashem. So often it's these traumatic experiences in life that spurred us on to look for something deeper, that there has to be something deeper than whatever was going on at the time, collecting Gashmias. There had to be more. There had to be more than that, right? And we looked, and we found, and it's endless because Hashem is infinite, so we can do infinite tshuva. Okay, so so this is this idea. What spurs us on? If these things spur us on, then it's a catalyst. We can why, as we've spoken about many times, why define it as a transgression? Why define it as a mistake? Let's define it as a catalyst for growth. It's such an empowering idea, and we have seen the truth of it. And we want to get those birurim, those, this is our avoda now. Let's use it all as a catalyst for growth. Why not? Right? Right. Okay, so we are making great progress. We still have another few minutes, and we're moving through this book. Okay, the bottom of 73. We see here that treating fears and phobias is itself a threefold process of spiritual growth that follows the Baal Shem Tov's paradigm. Again, the Hachna'ah Havdalah Hamtakah. Let's see how it works. Recognizing that Hashem is the source of all power is an act of submission to his omnipotence. Submission, that's the Hachna'ah. So recognizing that Hashem is the source of all power is Hachna'ah, okay? Want to experience Hachna'ah? All we have to do is recognize that Hashem is the source of all power. Hachna'ah. Like he's the creator and I'm a creation. That's Hachna'ah. Feel Hachna'ah, because remember, as we said at the very beginning, our quote, the circumstances of our life are from Hashem to help us lower. And the benefits of lowering our ego is that space becomes filled with Hashem's Rahmanas and joy. So, okay. So recognizing Hashem as the source of all power is an act of Hachna'ah to his omnipotence. Fearing him alone is an act of separating this fear from all spurious fears, from all false fears. So that's Havdalah. Havdalah is I feel a fear, and I'm separating it. I'm saying that this fear, and it's how it appears now, is not fear of Hashem. I can separate from this fear and transform it into fear of Hashem. What a great deal. Wow, 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 right? Very exciting. Okay, transforming all other fears into the fear of Hashem is an act of sweetening them. So what we've learned from the beginning of this chapter called Positive Reinterpretation and Inner Transformation is which is talking about our fears, is that we're seeing the Hachna'ah Havdalah Hamtakah of them. And what's very exciting, if you turn the page, you can see on the top of 74, this is summarized in a cute little chart for people who like charts. Okay, so let's look at it from the bottom. Hachna'ah, realizing Hashem's omnipotence, Hashem's all-powerfulness, that Hashem is the source of power. He's the creator and I'm a creation. That's Hachna'ah. We're not God. Well, God is everywhere, but you know what I mean. Okay, separation, step 2, fearing God alone. I'm separating my fear of God from other fears, all other false fears. And then the sweetening is transforming other fears into a fear of Hashem. Just knowing this is possible is liberating. Okay, it could take a while. it might take a while for me to really, it's a lifetime. I suppose it could take a lifetime. Just people are coming in here, yes. So this lifetime project of in terms of fear of Hachna'a, Havdalah, Hamtaka, realizing Hashem's power, fearing Hashem alone, and transforming other fears into the fear of Hashem. So next week, we're going to speak about the context of positive reinterpretation, but we've already started this idea of this chapter of inner transformation. So we know what the homework assignments are for this week. I'm just going to look if there's any chats that I must see. You keep freezing and there's no sound. Can't hear you. I hope can people hear me now? Yes? Yes, good. I'm so glad to hear that. That is quite lucky. Okay, homework assignments. So we'll all be on the same page. 1, the circumstances of our life are from Hashem to help us lower our ego. There's a fun one. So please note, our life has circumstances. Please note, these are the circumstances of my life. They are from Hashem. They're to help us lower our ego. That's one homework assignment. Okay? Homework assignment number 2 is to note when we feel fear, to note it, label it. If it's from whatever it is, and we're labeling it all as phobias, that they're immature fears. And we want to sweeten them into fear of Hashem, even if we can do it with the smallest thing, like the mouse in among my tea boxes. I know it's not like really scary, but there's something about it suddenly appearing there. And I know it's only to remind me that I want to be afraid of Hashem only, fear of Hashem. And we want it to be awe of Hashem, and we want it to be awe of feeling that we're in Hashem's presence. So that's our homework assignment.